Hello and welcome to the Wayfaring Panda. Today I'm going to be making a watercolor card using Art Impressions stamps, and I'm going to be using this one. I'm making a Hobbit card, and I'm making this for our cousin. He's the one that introduced me to the Lord of the Rings back in 1987. 1984 I think is when I read the Lord of the Rings. And he and my sister got me to read it. So I'm making this for his birthday. So of course you need a Hobbit Door. And then I'm using this stamp set. And these are all designed by Bonnie Krebs. And she has a video on making this card. And I'm changing it a little bit. And she always tells you to do that based on which stamps that you have. So she does use these two in the videos. Now she uses a different bridge, but this is the bridge set I have. So I think I'm going to either use this bridge or this bridge, whichever one works. And I'm going to make it kind of like, instead of a bridge over the water, that it's just going to be a dot going out into the water, because in the story they go on a ferry, so they go on a bridge that goes to the ferry. So I don't want it crossing over a river. It's more that you would take the bridge over. So I'm just going to have it probably in part of this. And then after that, then you kind of fill in with whatever foliage that you have. So these are some sets I may have. She uses some different ones in her video, and I will link her video at the end of this one so you can get more complete directions. But you want to have some grass and some flowers. And so this is, I think, the original flower set, so I'll probably use some of these small ones. And then she uses long stemmed ones to show perspective to make the door look smaller. And this is the newest one I've got. I haven't used before. There's some tulips. That's why I got this set. So I'll use some long stems from this. And then this set has some grasses. So whichever sets you have that have grass and whichever flowers that you have will work. Now she uses mushrooms in hers to kind of put in the foreground. I don't have those, but I thought I might put some animals, maybe some rabbits. And I might make a second one. If I do, I might put a dog and make one for my sister, since she also introduced me to The Hobbit, and it's one of her favorite books, at least The Lord of the Rings, not necessarily The Hobbit. So we have dogs, so I might put a dog in the foreground. So with the Art Impressions watercoloring, what you do is you use the stamps and you use watercolor markers to do watercolor. That way you don't have to be able to draw in order to make a watercolor picture. So to start with, I'm using Tombow dual brush markers, or you can use any other marker that is a watercolor marker. And I'm going to color the stamp. So I'm using the Hobbit Door from the Hobbit Door stamp set. And I'm going over it with brown, and then I'll add blue. So sometimes use different colors to give it more depth, because wood doesn't usually just one solid color. Now these stamps are rubber stamps, so you can't see where you're stamping exactly. And if you're doing a scene, you want to be able to stamp it exactly where you want it. So I'm using a stamp positioner, which is made of two pieces of plastic. It has this corner and a flat piece. So I put my stamp on an acrylic block, and then I put that on the stamp positioner in the corner. Then I can move the picture to see where I want it, and then I have my corner piece, and then I'm going to recolor, and I am taking off some of the ink because I plan on putting some vines there, so I don't want the door showing where the vines are going to be. Now that I got my Hobbit Door, I'm going to go ahead and put my bridge on the picture, and I'm not coloring quite the whole bridge because I want it to look like it stops and that there would be a place for there to be a boat or a ferry. Now the one tip that Bonnie gave when I learned how to do this is that you don't use the tip of your marker, use the side of your marker. That way you get more coverage and it doesn't take as long to color it. Next I'm going to use my scene stamp, which is called the Watercolor Stone Creek Scene. And Bonnie Krebs has several different scene stamps that you can use, and it allows you to stamp a scene that has perspective. So if you're like me and don't know how to draw a scene with perspective, this one gives you like 3 different layers of hills, so it looks like it goes further back, and then a little meandering river. So she also shows on the particular video where she used the Hobbit Door that you don't have to use the whole stamp, you could just use part of it. So I'm doing like she did, where she just used the rocks, and I'm putting that under the bridge and towards the bottom, so it looks like this is kind of the edge of the river, and then you can't see all the way across the river. And the colors I'm using is blue and a brown color to make it kind of my rock slick kind of multicolored gray. Now I'm just using a pencil to draw in where I'm going to have a hill, because I want it to look like the Hobbit Door is in a house that's built into the hill. And so I can go over this with my paint and also erase any pencil lines. Then I'm also adding some pencil lines on my door because I want to make it darker on one side to give my door a little bit more depth and shadow, so it looks more like it is built into a hill. And I also use my pencil to figure out where I want the lake to go. I decided to stamp a raccoon on my foreground, and I decided that would look the best because it's the largest of the animals in the stamp set. And so I thought that would make my Hobbit Door not look too small, because they're not fairies or hobbits. And I don't know that really there are raccoons in the Shire, because I think it's based on England, which I don't think they have raccoons, but it's a made up place, so I'm putting a raccoon. Now I'm using N35, and I'm also using my stamp platform to make sure I stamp it in the place that I want it to be. Next, I'm going to paint my raccoon kind of just like you traditionally would with watercolor, but with the markers I just smear them onto my glass mat, and I'm using a gray color which is N57, which is warm gray, and then I'm using the same color I did earlier, the N35, which is a cool gray, which is almost kind of black, and then I just paint it on with my water brush and some water. And I'm just putting the darker color on his tail where the darker stripes are, and on his face where his darker part of the mask would be, and using the cool or the warm gray, which is lighter, where he'd be a lighter gray. Also, I'm doing the darker color more on his back feet that's kind of underneath, because that's where there'd be more of a shadow. And I'm just using my black micron pen to go over his eyes and mouth and nose so they stand out more. I'm just adding a little bit more watercolor to make him look a little bit better. Now I know he's not perfect, but I'm doing this for fun. And you don't have to worry about being perfect. It's not going to an art museum. It's a card for my cousin. Since you use watercolor markers to color your stamps, that ink that you put down is actually watercolor. So if you use a wet brush like I'm doing now, you just kind of pull down the line and you pull it over to the side, and that gets your image colored. Now you can also do like I did the raccoon and add some color on the side to add more color to your door. So right now I'm just going over the lines where the wood is to bring out the depth. And also I want it to be darker along the side, on the right hand side, so it looks darker. And you want to make sure you don't cross over any of your lines, otherwise you'll lose the image that you stamped. I'm using a very thin water brush to brush on 969, which is chocolate color, around the edge of my doorknob and on the hinges. Next, I'm using 515, which is a light blue, to color my door. And then I also add on some darker blue, which is 528, and that's navy blue, because I wanted to make the right-hand side of the door look darker, since it should be a shadow there. Then I'm just using my N57, which is the warm gray, to go along the side of the little, I don't know what it's called, but the thing that the doorknob's on, and also at the bottom of what I'm going to think is a doorstep, so that'll be a little darker. I'm using my M35, which is the cool gray, which is almost black, to go around that box where the doorknob is. And I do apologize for the dog barking in the background. She's been barking loud tonight, and I've just given up on not getting her barking in the video. Then I'm just using my blues again to touch up the door and add a little bit more shadow. Now I'm using my thin watercolor brush that's wet to go along the lines on the bridge. I'm just going down on the vertical lines and also horizontal, bringing out the color towards the center of where the wooden post would be. And you can see this more than you can on the door, that I'm bringing out more of the color. And it's kind of coloring the bridge a brown. Now you want to make sure that you try to leave some white. That'll make it look more watercolored with some white space. And also make sure you don't go over any lines. Like I said before, that'll make you lose your stamped image if you cross lines. Now I'm just doing the same thing with the stonework where the step would be and along the top of the door. Then I'm using 969, which is the chocolate marker, to add some more brown color to the side of the bridge and the bottom poles, because that's where it would be shadowed and not have as much sun. Then I'm just using my brown micron pen to go along the side of the bridge where there would be divisions where the different boards would meet. I'm just using my watercolor brush again to pull out a little bit more of the brown paint to touch up the bridge. Next, I'm going to use my watercolor brush to bring out that watercolor paint that we did with the stones. And it's really important to try to leave a little bit of white space to give it highlights, and that will also give it some dimension. Now that I got the main elements for my design on the page, I'm just going to be filling in with foliage, and just use whatever foliage stamps that you have. So what you do is you color on the stamp just like you did before, and I'm just using different shades of green, and the greens I have are jade and olive, but use whatever shade of green that you have. So I'm doing grass along where I think maybe the walkway from the Hobbit house to the ford might be, so it creates a path. Now what you do is you do what we call multi-generational stamping, and it's where you stamp more than once you color it. So with this technique, you kind of put the stamp down with the grass and stamp around the grass about 5 times. So it looks like it's different shades of green that way. Then I'm going to go over my grass with a watercolor brush. And this is the part I'm really trying to get more practice with, is knowing exactly how much water to put down. So you just kind of draw along the grass. You don't want to make it into a blob, which sometimes is I put down too much water and get it more blobby. So you want it to still have a little bit of the look of the lines, but you don't want it to look like a stamped image. You do want it to look like it's watercolored. And plus it gives it a little bit more dimension. And so by adding the water, it does look watercolored. Then I'm just using my watercolor palette again to paint on my river. And I didn't turn my pen where you could see what number it was, and I forgot. So it's either the light blue, which is 515, or turquoise, which is 443. But just use whatever color blue that you happen to have. And I'm trying to paint it on so that I make a darker blue under the bridge, because that's where the bridge would cast a shadow. Then I'm just painting on some green right under my raccoon, because I wanted the color to go all the way to the edge so that it'll have a clean, crisp line when I take off the painter's tape. Then I'm using my 158 marker, which is dark olive, to color a foliage stamp, and you can use whichever foliage. I'm just using one that looks like a vine. I'm going to put that around my door to look like the vines are growing around the door. And with this, you do multi-generational stamping. Generally, you'll do one in the middle and then do 2 to the left and right, but I'm trying to get it to go kind of around the door, so I'm kind of going a little bit up and down. The other thing is I'm not coloring the whole stamp because this, you can tell this would go off the card. And it's easier to control if you don't use the whole stamp when you're trying to stamp in one particular area. I wanted to add some flowers around the vines, so I'm using a small flower stamp from the original flower stamp set, and I'm using Periwinkle, which is 603. These kind of look like little foxgloves, I think. Anyway, you just do the multi-generational stamping, so you'll stamp once and then kind of travel in a circle. That way it gives the flowers a variation of color. I'm adding some short grass, just like I did the grass along the lake and the sidewalks. Next, I'm just adding some water by dabbing on just a little bit of water onto the foliage, so it gives it the watercolor look. So I'm still working on this to get to where I get it look like watercolor, but I don't get it too saturated to where it just becomes a blob. Next, I'm using a stamp for grass from the Watercolor Foliage set number 5, but you could use whatever grass that you have, or if you don't, you can use taller flowers. And the color I'm using is Avocado, which is number 98. So I just color my stamp, and then I do the multi-generational stamping where I stamp once and then try to stamp to the left and right. And of course that still gives it kind of different colors, and I'm stamping around the raccoon and some of the areas where there's other grass, because since this is an area around a river, it would be a little bit more wild and not manicured, so the grass would be different levels. Then I filled in the rest of the area with a stamp from the original flower set that has a bunch of little flowers, and I just used some gold colors, and that's 985, which is kind of an orangey yellow color. And then after I stamped the whole area on the hill with that, then I dab on some water. But I did get a little bit too much water, and it got a lot more blurry than I wanted. So I did make a second card, and on that one I think it turned out better. So maybe you do good with this the first time you try, but with me I need a lot of practice. So it still turned out like a nice card to send, but of course it can be better. On the other card, I don't show how I did that one because I pretty much did the same, but I did do a little dog on the side because I painted it kind of like our dog. And also on the Lord of the Rings, they board a ferry, and one of the farmers they passed by in the Shire had a dog, and they're always talking about the dog chasing them when they go collect mushrooms. Then I just use my taller grass stamp from my Watercolor Foliage set 5 to add some gold colored grass over the flowers. Now on the final part of the video, I'm adding some flowers, so I use one of the longer stem flowers from the Flowers set 5. And the good thing about these stamps when you're using the markers is I could color the bottom part with the green, and then you can color the flower with another color. And that's what I did. So I used blue to kind of coordinate with the door. Now the only thing I didn't like how this turned out is the path was still white, and I tried to color that in after I added the flowers, and then it got kind of smudged. But that part's not in the video. And also I colored the sky. So I'll have that picture for you at the end of the video. And then on my second card, which I don't have on the video because that would be extremely too long, I did it pretty much all the same except for the dog. And then I colored my path first and then stamped on my flowers. So then I didn't get that smudged walkway look. I'll put a list of all the products that I used in the description below. Some of these will be affiliate links. They don't cost you anything extra to use, but I do get a small commission from any sales that the links generate, and that helps support my videos and my website. If you're not already a subscriber, I really appreciate if you can subscribe to my channel. And if you are a subscriber, I want to thank you so much for continuing to support my channel. If you like the video, please give it a like. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.